My fiancée mocked my budget at our engagement dinner. I sent her a breakup text and canceled the venue. I30 had been engaged to Lila 29F for 6 months, and if there was one thing we'd always bonded over, it was the idea of building a life that felt intentional, not flashy, just ours. I worked as a project manager for a small design firm, steady but not lavish. And Lila was a freelance graphic designer who loved the freedom of her work, but often juggled inconsistent clients. From the start, we talked about our wedding as a celebration, not a status symbol. I'd grown up watching my parents stretch every dollar to give us a stable home, and that mindset stuck. Frugality wasn't about being cheap. It was about valuing what mattered most. Time together, not things. We'd spent weeks researching venues, narrowing it down to a charming barn on the outskirts of the city that offered a BYOB option and let us bring in our own caterers. My mom had volunteered to make her famous lasagna and cookies, which Lila had gushed about at every family dinner. The total cost would be 1/3 of what the downtown ballrooms quoted, and we planned to put the savings toward a down payment on a condo. Something we'd dreamed of since our second date, when we'd driven through a quiet neighborhood and pointed out houses with potential. Lila had even helped me draft a budget spreadsheet, highlighting line items we could trim. No custom neon signs, DIY centerpieces with wildflowers from my aunt's garden, and ones we shouldn't skimp on. A good photographer, comfortable seating for our 50 closest friends and family. Our engagement dinner was at a cozy Italian restaurant we'd frequented since we started dating. Nothing fancy, just red checkered tablecloths and the kind of garlic bread that makes you forget your manners. I'd invited my sister, her husband, and Lila's parents and best friend, eager to share our wedding plans and celebrate with the people we loved. As we waited for our appetizers, I pulled out my phone to show everyone the barn's Instagram page, grinning as I talked about how we'd hang fairy lights and set up a s'mores station for dessert. And the best part? I said, we're staying under budget, so we can put $15K toward the condo down payment next year. I didn't see the eye roll Lila gave her best friend until it was too late. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just tired from a busy week of client deadlines. But when her mom asked about the menu, Lila let out a laugh that felt sharp, not warm. That's when I realized this wasn't just a momentary mood. It was something bigger. Something she'd been holding back. I set my phone down, my chest feeling a little tight, but I told myself to stay calm. After all, this was our celebration, and I didn't want to ruin it with tension. But as the night went on, that tightness didn't fade. It grew, like a quiet warning I couldn't ignore. The mockery started subtly, then snowballed faster than I could process. When the waiter refilled our water glasses, Lila leaned across the table, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Can you believe he's making us have a budget wedding? I always thought I'd marry someone who wanted to splurge on the one day we're supposed to feel special. Her best friend snickered, and Lila's dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My sister gave me a sympathetic look, but I just stared at Lila, trying to reconcile the woman who'd helped me build that budget with the one sitting across from me now. I thought we agreed this was what we wanted, I said, my voice quieter than I intended. You said the condo was more important than a big wedding. Lila scoffed, picking at her salad. I said that to be nice. I didn't think you'd actually make me settle for a barn in the middle of nowhere with grocery store flowers and your mom's lasagna. Don't you want me to feel proud of our wedding? What are people going to think when I tell them we're getting married in a place that smells like hay? My throat went dry. This wasn't just teasing. This was humiliation in front of the people who mattered most. It's not settling, I said, trying to keep my tone steady. It's choosing what's practical for our future. Remember when we talked about wanting to stop renting next year? This budget lets us do that. But Lila wasn't listening. She turned to her mom, ignoring me completely. Mom, remember that venue I showed you downtown? The one with the rooftop terrace and the 5-course meal? That's what I should be having. Not this budget-friendly disaster. He's so busy counting pennies that he doesn't care if I'm happy. Her words stung. But what hurt more was the way she dismissed everything we'd planned together. The spreadsheet she'd helped me color code. The late-night conversations about how we didn't want to start our marriage in debt. The way she'd hugged me and said, I love that we're on the same page about what's important. Now it all felt like a lie. My sister tried to diffuse the tension, saying, the barn sounds lovely, intimate, personal, way better than a stuffy ballroom. But Lila shot her a glare. Easy for you to say. You had a big wedding with a live band and a cake that cost more than my rent. Why should I have to settle for less just because he's scared to spend money? I felt my patience snap, not with anger, but with a quiet realization. This wasn't about the wedding. It was about values. I'd always believed that love meant compromising, that a strong marriage was built on shared goals, not lavish parties. But Lila saw it differently. She saw my budget as a sign of inadequacy, my practicality as a failure to splurge on her. When the check came, I paid without a word, the silence at the table heavier than the awkward small talk that had filled it earlier. Lila didn't apologize. She just checked her phone, scrolling through wedding photos like nothing had happened. On the drive home, I tried to talk to her, to ask why she'd humiliated me in front of our families. I was just being honest, she said, keeping her eyes on the road. You need to stop being so sensitive. A wedding is a big deal, and I don't want to regret it because you're too cheap to do it right. That's when I knew there was no coming back from this. It wasn't about the barn or the budget. It was about respect. She didn't respect my values, my upbringing, or the plans we'd made as a couple. As we pulled into her driveway, I told her I needed to think, and she shrugged, like my feelings were an inconvenience. I drove home alone, the radio off, replaying every word of the night in my head. By the time I walked into my apartment, I'd made my decision. It was painful, but it was necessary. Some dreams aren't meant to be shared, especially when they come at the cost of your self-respect. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the budget spreadsheet Lila and I had created. Her notes in pink font, mine in blue, little hearts drawn next to the line item for s'mores. It felt like a relic of a version of us that no longer existed. At 6 a.m., I picked up my phone and typed out a text, short and clear. No anger, just honesty. Last night made it clear we have different values when it comes to what matters in life. I can't build a future with someone who doesn't respect my priorities. And I don't want you to settle for a life that doesn't make you happy. I'm canceling the venue and calling off the engagement. I wish you all the best. I hit send, then called the barn owner. She was kind, told me she was sorry things hadn't worked out, and refunded our deposit without question. I texted our close friends and family, explaining that we'd split amicably, mostly true. There was no yelling, no fighting, just a quiet end, and that the wedding was off. My sister came over with coffee and hugged me, saying I'd made the right choice, even if it didn't feel like it then. Lila texted back an hour later, angry and confused. You're breaking up with me over a wedding? That's ridiculous. I can't believe you're being this dramatic. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Our values were too far apart, and arguing wouldn't change that. Over the next few weeks, I returned her engagement ring. She left it on my porch in an envelope, no note, and sorted through the few things we'd shared. A blanket we'd bought on our first trip. A cookbook we'd annotated with recipes we wanted to try. It was sad, but it wasn't regretful. The fallout wasn't easy. I missed the idea of getting married, of building that condo life with someone. But I didn't miss the way Lila had made me feel, like my values were a flaw, like my practicality was a failure. Slowly, I started to heal. I focused on my job, spent more time with my family, and even reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with while I was in the relationship. I realized that being single wasn't a punishment. It was a chance to honor what I needed, without compromising. 6 months later, I was sitting at that same Italian restaurant with my sister, eating garlic bread and laughing about nothing in particular when it hit me, the moral of it all. Love isn't just about shared dreams. It's about shared respect for each other's priorities. A wedding, a home, a life together. None of it works if you're not on the same page about what matters most. I'd never regretted being practical, and I shouldn't have to apologize for valuing our future over a one-day party. Lila wanted a wedding that made her feel special, and that's okay. But I wanted a partner who understood that special doesn't have to mean expensive, and that respect is non-negotiable. I still think about that barn sometimes, about the fairy lights and s'mores and the life I thought we'd build. But I don't mourn it anymore. Instead, I'm grateful for the clarity that night gave me. Relationships should lift you up, not make you question your worth or your values. And sometimes, walking away, quietly, logically, without anger, is the kindest thing you can do for both people. You deserve someone who sees your priorities as their own, who celebrates your practicality as much as your passions, and who would never mock the things that matter to you, especially not in front of the people you love. That's the lesson I carry with me now. Never settle for someone who makes you feel small for being true to yourself. Your values aren't a flaw, and your dreams don't have to look like anyone else's. The right person will meet you where you are, and together you'll build something that feels like yours. No mockery, no compromise, just respect.